What's up guys, welcome back. Today I am going to do my early Championship 2023-2024 predictions. It is only within a matter of weeks until the new season starts, and I think now is around the time where everyone starts getting a little bit excited that the season is right around the corner. And this is when I like to start putting some predictions now back into the channel. Now take these predictions with a pinch of salt. These are not my official predictions, but they are only my early predictions. Meaning basically my ranking from 24th to first place are basically ranking how much confidence I have in these teams going into the new season. Some teams may surprise you, some teams may not surprise you, and you will know that I've not really made any content for quite some time. So if I'm a little bit rusty and get things wrong, do just let me know in the comments down below, and hopefully I'll feel a little bit more clued up doing more of these. But I have got a week off work, so I do have time today to give you my early predictions. And what I'd like you guys to do in the comments down below, please share your early thoughts. Who do you think is going to get in the top 6? Who do you think is going to get relegated? Do you think there's going to be any team that has a big drop off, any team that has a big improvement? Those sorts of teams I would really love to see you predict in the comments down below. Before we start today, please smash the like button if you've not done so. It really does help the growth of this channel. Please do hit the subscribe button as well if you've not done so as well, as we're trying to creep up to 2,000 subscribers. It would be an amazing achievement if we can get there. And please also share the channel too. All these things really help. But without any further ado, let's start unveiling my early Championship 23-24 predictions. So starting off my table in 24th place, probably quite predictable, but I have actually gone for Rotherham this year to get down in 24th place. It was an almighty miracle to see Rotherham survive last season, and pretty comfortably so in the end of it, with Matt J actually joining, just before the halfway point in the season. And a lot of us anticipated a bit of a drop off when Paul Warne left Rotherham to join Derby County in the division below, but it turned out that Rotherham actually already had some great fundamentals in place and did survive in the Championship, and undoubtedly they have got players to allow them to survive. Now their transfer activity has been rather quiet. It's been 3 transfers. I think Grant Hall is the most interesting one that they did manage to get him. I think Ogbene leaving to join Luton Town. Obviously, I think if a Premier League club is going to come calling for one of your strikers, you're not really going to turn it down. They've lost Washington. Kyoso's going to Peterborough on loan. So there have been some players, lingering around the first team that they have gone, and I don't particularly think they've replaced them as of yet. So I think their squad's slightly worse off than what it was despite the 3 transfers that they got in. I think at this moment of time, I know Rotherham is going to be right down there. I'm going to be very surprised if they have like a mid-table finish around like 12th or 13th or whatever. But I do think they'll be down there. And for that, they've not really improved their first team that much yet. I'm not really thinking that I'm going to be even more confident with this Rotherham team, sadly. But I do love an underdog, and I really hope they prove me wrong. One other team which I am really not confident with is QPR, Queen's Park Rangers. Now, honestly, some of their defending last year was almost comical, and based on that alone, it almost surprised me to see them survive. But it's a real shame how they dropped off from looking such an amazing gelled team to a disjointed, disorganised team that they turned into. They went through 3 managers last season, ended up with Gareth Ainsworth, who managed to get 1 win enough to just push them over the line and to release any struggles of relegation. They're assuming starting their next season with Gareth Ainsworth, where he's not had the best track record of keeping teams in the Championship. Of course, he had a chance with Wickham, but of course he didn't. I mean, it was quite remarkable that he even got them to nearly survive. In terms of transfers goes, I'm really intrigued with Begovic. I think he's a great goalkeeper. He's not the youngest, he's 36 years old now. But I think that's actually a decent replacement for Seny Dieng. That is one of the positive bit of businesses that I've actually seen them do. But the rest, I'm not really too sure if I'm particularly liking. They've lost one of their best defenders in Rob Dickey. They've also managed to lose Conor Masterson now permanently, this time to Gillingham as well. And some really experienced players that they lost as well. So I do think they've lost a good part of that squad. And apart from Begovic, they've not really brought too many players that stand out to me so far. So I'm a bit worried about QPR this season. 22nd place for me is the only newly promoted team from League One to go down. And I'm going with Plymouth Argyle. I am going for Plymouth. And I do feel quite sad predicting them to go down and writing them off this early on. Now, Plymouth are by no means a championship team. This is their first season back in the championship since 2010. And their recovery, considering about 3-4 years ago they were in League 2 to get to this stage now, is nothing short of sensational. Steven Schumacher and this whole entire team deserve a monster amount of credit, and to rack over 100 points in League 1 as well is no easy feat. The last team I remember doing that was Wolverhampton Wanderers, where we saw a couple of years later they turned out to be one of the best championship teams that we had seen. But I think the thing is with Plymouth Argyle that I'm a little bit worried about with already is that they have let some of their really key players go. One of them being Niall Ennis. He has joined Blackburn Rovers. He was a very integral part, especially in the second part of the season where they lost Morgan Whittaker. But speak of the devil, Morgan Whittaker, he has now returned to Plymouth and they've managed to get him off Swansea for around a £1.15 million deal, which is actually rather decent. They got Lewis Gibson, which I think is an alright signing. I wouldn't say it's a top tier defensive signing, but I think it's an okay one. Kessler Hayden could be an interesting wild card, but again, with some of the players that they've lost, I mean, with Niall Ennis really being the main one, they've lost other experienced heads in that team, Wilson and Mayer, both being over 30. I just think Plymouth need to invest a bit more. I think Plymouth could potentially win me over if they do a bit more business before I do my official predictions. But as of right now, I think I will put them down in 22nd. But I think they're going to be an interesting team. I think they actually will be a bit of an exciting team to watch. I just hope that they deliver what they were able to deliver in a really competitive League One campaign last year, and to potentially survive with a couple of seasons in the Championship would do the club a good amount of good. Now, 21st place, I put Cardiff, so I'm expecting no change in position for Cardiff City, to be honest. Now, they have made a lot of changes, including the manager. They've got Errol Balu in, which you would have saw my reaction with my first stream back, because I did look at the name, but I didn't really make a note of what he did. But very big amount of experience managing in Turkey, but he's not won any titles. He did manage Fenerbahce for a bit, but he did fail to get Fenerbahce to win anything, and Fenerbahce would have been considered as one of the top Turkish teams in that league. I think only amassed a 40% win rate with them as well, which is not terrible, but it's not particularly great if you weigh the standards of Fenerbahce. Now, for transfers, I am liking the fact they got Carlin Grant. I like Aaron Ramsey, and I'm alright with Yaku Mate. I was more pro Yaku Mate a couple of years ago. He has been a little bit more inconsistent over the years, especially with Reading, but I think those three transfers are actually okay. You know, Aaron Ramsey is only 32. He's not like he's 36 and going to play his final few years with Cardiff. You know, I do see Aaron Ramsey being a really important leader. So those transfers do excite me slightly, and I think that is the reason why I've ultimately not got Cardiff down in 22nd and I've got Plymouth there instead. I do like their transfers. I'm a little bit uncertain with a bit of Errol Balu, but he could turn out to be one, you know, of those managers that just walks into this league and think, oh, this is a piece of cake and we're going to win most of our games. You know, that could really happen. Cardiff is a very unpredictable team. They're a little bit of an anomaly this year, and I like that. I like feeling like that I'm not so certain within my prediction, and ultimately the bigger the surprise, you know, the better the reaction you're going to get out of it. So we've made it up to 20th place now, and it's Sheffield Wednesday, the second newly promoted team. I do think they'll survive. Now, there is a little bit of a really nagging feeling that I am not too sure with the mix of Sheffield Wednesday and Xisco Munoz. Xisco Munoz, when he was in the Championship with Watford, did what he instructed to do. He turned around a real what's the right word for it? Just a real disjointed Watford side. Under Ilish, they were just completely all over the place. But he did manage to get an identity and a style of play that suited this Watford team. Got them promoted and actually did okay at the first couple of games in the Premier League. It did involve, I believe, an 8-0 defeat against Manchester City. I believe it was Munoz who was in charge. It could have been Ranieri, but I knew it was one of Watford's earlier Premier League games, so it could have been Munoz who was in charge of that. And ultimately, I think that is what dismissed him in the end. And I think in general, if you're going to lose to Man City, you know, it's not too much of a disgrace, you know, to lose. You know, losing 8-0 should be a disgrace, but Man City just kind of takes that disgrace factor a tiny bit away from it. But even so, to lose 8-0 in general, it is a problem up here mentally. And I think with Sheffield Wednesday, I wouldn't necessarily think that they are the strongest newly promoted team I've seen go up from League One. But what I will say, definitely a competitive one. To rack up 96 points in a season alone tells you that, you know, they should be good. You know, that's already more than what Wigan got when they were relegated as well, and they were champions in that season as well. All these three newly promoted teams from League One going up, I think, can offer something, and it'll be nice to see all three of them survive, but I think it is going to be quite difficult for all of those scenarios to happen. Sheffield Wednesday, I think even if the project with Munoz doesn't go well, I just have this feeling, and Chansiri or whoever's going to be around, because I know there's some pressure on him right now, would just find someone to replace him, potentially lead them over the line, because I do think there's plenty of options available there. I mean, either way, with the resources they got, no matter who they've got in charge, I think Sheffield Wednesday should, being the key word, be alright for this season. 19th place for me might be the shock so far, but Bristol City, I am anticipating them to fall quite a bit because they finished 14th place last year. Why do I think Bristol City will fall off a little bit? It's a strange one really with Bristol City, because I just see them as a team that have kind of plateaued. They've not really inspired me that they're going to be climbing up the table. They go through these peaks and troughs of form that I keep regurgitating on. Their transfers as well, you know, apart from Rob Dickie, who I quite like, Macquarie could be an interesting one from Aberdeen. I've not seen a lot of the Scottish League though, so I can't really comment on his ability there. And Jason Knight, again, is interesting, but I don't necessarily think he waltzes into that starting 11 and he improves them. You know, the only thing I see with those types of signings, maybe the exception of Rob Dickie, as potential squad players and ones who can potentially do a job when Bristol City are stretched with injuries. They have lost Jay De Silva, a common fullback in their squad, to a championship rival in Coventry. So I do think they are around the same. I just think this season is going to be so competitive, and I do think if any of these teams do not build up from their last season, they will almost suddenly find themselves sleepwalking down the table. And that, I think, is what might happen with Bristol City. I hope that I'm wrong, though, because I do think they have got some really nice players in that squad. I just feel, for me at this moment, it feels a bit stagnated. And I think at this moment in time, you've got so many teams, especially in the lower part of where they finished last year, having great movement and developments off the pitch, that I think that could really have a detrimental effect to Bristol City if they do not do that as well and get more players in to improve their starting 11. So that's why I've got Bristol City as low down the list, but I could easily be wrong. That might be one team I could really adjust in my official predictions. 18th place, I've gone for Hull City again. I really wished I put Hull City higher because I do like Liam Rosenior. I do like the style of football that he has got Hull City to play. And with a full season, I think we can start seeing improvements with Hull City. And 18th is a little bit of a drop from where they finished last year. In terms of signings goes, Liam Delap does interest me, although I do think he really struggled at Stoke City. And if he's going to import the same amount of impact he did with Stoke, then it's almost no point Hull City signing him, unfortunately, there. Xavier Siemens from Chelsea is also quite interesting. So I think at this moment of time, again, I think I'm missing enough investment to give me enough confidence to see Hull potentially match their position and then to potentially climb up the table. It's really going to be down again to see if Rosenior can pull off a good run of form together. And if Hull City don't start well, then that could definitely make things very, very difficult for their season. 17th place, I've actually gone for Blackburn Rovers. That is by far the biggest drop I've made on a team so far, considering that Blackburn were really close to getting into the top 6 last year, and now I've predicted them 10 places lower, so I will justify myself for that. But I will go on to say that John Dahl Tomasson definitely for me should have been top 3 managers of the year in the Championship. To get a team like Blackburn, which is not a big squad at all, in history they're big, but in terms of what they had, on their plate, it definitely shouldn't have been this close to a top 6 finish. So the fact he did that is amazing in its way. Now, what we are seeing with Blackburn is a whole matter of change, and it does feel like that there's a tiny bit of turmoil at the moment with the transfer business at the moment. Of course, the biggest departure was Ben Brereton Diaz joining Villarreal. We have Ayala retiring, Dax retired as well, from the club at least, not from football completely. But in terms of additions, we've got Ennis coming in, and other than that, I don't really see anyone else that could potentially improve that squad, to be honest. And they have lost some big players, and I don't think Ennis is necessarily going to fill in the shoes of Ben Brereton Diaz. I know he's also a wider player like what Ben Brereton Diaz was. I just think expectations are going to be a bit higher with him this year, and there were rumours of John Dahl Tomasson walking away. I don't believe those rumours, unless we hear a little bit more later on this week about it. But if there is conflicts going round in terms of business, transfer business at least, it can be very disruptive. And I do think with this kind of chaotic nature, that is why I put Blackburn down a couple of places. Maybe 17 was a bit low in hindsight, but I think it was really difficult to make this table in general based on my thoughts and feelings of all the teams in the Championship this year, considering that I've not been paying too much attention. But I think right of what I've heard, I think Blackburn around there is around right at the moment. But that probably will be another team alongside Bristol City that will be moving in my official predictions. So, coming in at 16th place, it is Ipswich. So I am predicting Ipswich to be the best newly performed promoted team. So, reason for that is that I do think their structure is really good. I think they can score plenty of goals. I think they scored the most goals in the EFL. I think apart from Manchester City, Ipswich scored the most. And ironically enough, I did manage to see 4 Ipswich goals when I saw them in the 4 games I was there. 2 of them they didn't, but their other 2, they scored 2 in a game. And that's exactly what you see from Ipswich. You can either get them being frustrated and they lose by a silly goal that they concede, or you can see them score at least 2 goals a game. And if you're going to get that with Ipswich, I think they can definitely compete in the season. And with all the other times I have seen Ipswich around, when I've not been in their stadium at least, they have actually kept a great defensive record. In fact, I think them and Sheffield Wednesday had the best defence in League One as well. So I do think Ipswich have got a great balance of a decent defence with a good attack. With their transfer business, they managed to get George Hurst permanently, which I think is one of the biggest signings they've done. When he came in, Hurst had a bit of a tricky start, but once he got going and got his first goal, he looked unstoppable. That game against Barnsley at Oakwell, to this day, I think is one of his best individual performances for Ipswich. So I generally think, as a whole, they still got the main core of that team, including McKenna, who was linked with some Championship clubs. He penned a long-term deal to manage Ipswich, which I think having that stability is going to help. Now, there's some people predicting them finishing top half or pushing top 6. Now, I'm not against that, because we saw exactly that last year when Sunderland came up and they just rocked into this new Championship that had not really been for 5 years, and think, okay, well, we're getting top 6 already. We're going to be this close to the Premier League. And there's no doubt that Ipswich have the ability for it, but whether I think they'll execute it, I don't think they will. I think if they do get a couple of injuries, I genuinely think their second squad in command is a bit of a gap with their first team, for what I've seen. Especially when I saw them play in the Carabao Cup, because it was very much their second team. And it almost was night and day when I saw Ipswich within a matter of weeks later play against Barnsley with their strongest team. Everything just was so much quicker, and if they play with some of those players in their second team when they have to fill those square pegs over circle gaps, I think it's the other way around. But you get what I'm saying. You know, with their substitute players, I don't think that they pose the same quality as those first team players do. If they say fit this first team, I think they could have a chance for top 10. But being realistic, I think they'll finish 16th, and I think it's going to be the safest prediction I can bring so far. I mean, maybe a couple more signings, I could be inclined to push them a little bit higher, but as a whole, I'm going to put Ipswich 16th. 15th place in the table is Preston North End. Now, this is a little bit of a drop as well. You know, Preston typically would finish around their 14th, 13th, 12th place position there. And at this moment of time, a bit similar with Bristol City, just feels very stagnating. Not much movement going around this club at the moment. You know, a real lack of urgency at the moment. They did get a couple of new signings quite recently, though, that I will talk about. Fosker Jensen from Denmark, I think, is okay. You know, it's an intriguing signing, I would say. Dwayne Ohms from Championship rival Huddersfield, I think could be a good signing. Will Keane, interesting. Calvin Ramsey, interesting. Don't necessarily think he's going to be good right from the get-go, but I think he will be an interesting long-term option. Will Keane is a good signing, I think, for experience. I think Will Keane actually might be their best signing so far for me. But at this moment of time, they also lost Daniel Johnson. They couldn't agree on extending his contract, unfortunately, for them there. Olsunde, which was a disastrous signing, and Onoma have gone from Preston as well. So I think the impact of losing Johnson, I think, will have a bit of an impact on this Preston team. He did really dictate at times the way that Preston played, and they will have to kind of formulate a way of playing without him. And I think that will take a little bit of time. And I think with the signings there, only a handful I see them starting that starting 11 as well. So I think it'll be more or less around the same. But again, like was with Bristol City, I think it's going to be very, very competitive this year. And I think it could see a couple of these real middle of the road teams just slowly just trickle down a little bit down the table if they do not start picking up some form together and improving their squad. And obviously we've still got a lot of time this transfer window. My opinions can definitely be swayed, but as of right now, I'm going to put Preston 15th. So 14th, I've gone for Swansea. So again, another little drop for Swansea City. And it's going to be an interesting one because they have lost a good part of their starting 11. Manning going to Southampton, you know, obviously reuniting in a way with Russell Martin. And then you get Joel Latibodiere very recently leaving Swansea to join Coventry. And I think those are two starting 11 players. And as of right now, I am not really seeing enough movement in that transfer window that suggests to me that Swansea are addressing their starting 11. Only probably Jerry Yates. Jerry Yates could potentially start, but at the same time, you know, if they don't tweak their formation and go for two strikers, you know, it's going to be either him or Joel Pirro. And if Joel Pirro leaves, that's a lot of goals they're taking out of the team, and he has been linked with a move away. They've got a new manager in Michael Duff. Obviously, Russell Martin's been prized away by Southampton. Interesting choice, and I do really like Michael Duff. I saw his Barnsley team play Ipswich, and I thought really, really good the way that actually his Barnsley team played. Didn't necessarily carry a lot of the ball, but were very, very organised and were very, very effective with their high press and their counter-attacks. So I do think Michael Duff can be a good championship manager. Just feels like a very different style of football than what Swansea are used to. I think it's going to be a lot for them to try and adapt to it. And I think that adaptation could set them back a couple of weeks. But I think slowly but surely they'll start creeping back up the table again. And I think 14th is a decent finish. 13th place for me is Sunderland. So that might surprise you, but I am predicting Sunderland for not a major drop, but just a little drop down the table for me. And I think it's going to be very difficult for them to repeat the success of last season. You know, even with a lot of injuries that a lot of Sunderland fans like to remind me, it was, in a way, like a miracle to even get them to that top 6. And at this moment of time, their signings for me kind of increased the squad, depth. And it's a very youthful squad again. But what I do see is a lot of their high-profile players being linked. And I'm just going by the impression that I think a couple of those players could, potentially start being prized away. And if any of them pick up some really big injuries at the start of the season, I think, again, Sunderland are going to find it very, very tricky. And one player that I think they'll be very sad not to have this season is Amad Diallo. He's already impressed for Manchester United in their pre-season tour. So I think it's going to be very unlikely for Diallo to come back to Sunderland. Although I've been proven wrong before by these sorts of things. But as of right now, without that sort of quality, thinking that we could get some more injuries within this Sunderland squad, and the players bringing in are not necessarily starting 11 players, I think at this moment of time, I'm going to anticipate their squad being at a worse place than what it was last year, basically. And it's a tough one, really. I think Sunderland, again, is really just down to what's in front of them for this season, to be honest. So I'm going to go 13th, maybe a little bit low, but at this moment of time, that is my level of confidence in Sunderland, in what I think will happen to them going to the start of the season. So we've now made it to the top of the table. 12th place is Stoke City. So this is actually one of the highest finishes I've predicted for Stoke City for quite some time, to be honest. Alex Neil, this will be his first full season with Stoke City. And you can remember with Alex Neil's first full season at Preston, he did really, really well there. Obviously, it kind of tailed out at the end, but I think with Stoke City, with a first full season there, I actually think he'll do a lot of good things there. And his signings already, getting Ben Pearson and Daniel Johnson, they all sound familiar. It's like getting the old band back together. It's Preston 2.0 with his Stoke City side at the moment. Michael Rose from Coventry, I also think is an interesting transfer. But also Ender Stevens, a transfer that I don't think many people were talking about. But this is an Ender Stevens, a player who has witnessed promotion with Sheffield United. And I think at the same time, and by the looks of things, is that Alex Neil is prioritising improving that back line. And I'm really glad he's doing that, because I think that has been one of Stoke's biggest issues. And I think slowly but surely, if they can just build their groundwork by building a good back line, they'll eventually start improving their attack. Because another thing that really struggled with last year was just the fact that their attack had so much XG, but they just did not take their chances. So if they can keep those clean sheets with that new defence, and they can get some of their players scoring more frequently, I think we'll start seeing a very small improvement for Stoke. Not as much an improvement to get him to the top 6, but I definitely think we'll see some progress, which I think Stoke has to actually be quite encouraged to see, to be honest, because it's been all doom and gloom, really, for Stoke, ever since they were relegated. Now, next in the table is Birmingham, so I'm really surprised to put Birmingham this high up. But there is so much optimism around this Birmingham side. They've had a change of ownership now, and their transfers are definitely eye-raising, to say the least. But to talk about the transfers that I like so far, I like the signing of Ethan Laird. Dion Sanderson returning to Birmingham is good, I think. 2 experienced young championship defenders already. Tyler Roberts as a striker option from recently relegated Leeds, I think is a good signing as well. Bielik, getting him back permanently, I think is great. Dembele from Bournemouth, I think he didn't really have a lot of time with Bournemouth, but if we're going back to his Peterborough days, he would be a good championship player as well. There's been some real interesting signings from Birmingham. The only major loss I see so far is them losing to Heath Chong to Luton Town. So this is the second team Luton have really just basically taken their best player from. But I think with those additions, I think they can improve. I really do think so. The only sort of barrier I have is the potential of John Eustace. Can John Eustace start implementing his ideas? Can he get this Birmingham to improve and take a couple of teams on? I think it's going to be very competitive, and I think it's going to be a very tested season for him. But as a whole, I am feeling a lot more confident of this Birmingham side, and I genuinely think this is probably going to be their best opportunity of a decent season in over 6 or 7 years, which is crazy that they've been really lingering in a low part of the table in the Championship for that long. And Birmingham fans, let me know how you think going into this new season. 10th place, I've put Huddersfield. Main reason being Neil Warnock. That is really the reason why. Because if I'm basing it off their transfer activity, I won't lie that I think they've had one of the worst transfer windows so far. Barely anything has gone through the door for Huddersfield, and they've lost a player in Dwayne Holmes, which is not necessarily a starting player anymore, but can definitely be an option for them there. But pretty much with Huddersfield, the fact that they have got Neil Warnock in, the amount of points they were able to pick up since he managed them there, if they get him for a full season, which he is definitely going to manage the full season for Huddersfield, I think it's going to be interesting to see how much Warnock can push him up the table. And I definitely think he can get them with a decent finish. You know, if they get Huddersfield to finish around 10th place, I mean, that is a tremendous improvement for where they finished last year. 9th place for me is Watford. So I'm not actually predicting Watford to get into the top 6, despite this being their second year of parachute payments. Reason being, I don't see enough in this squad as of yet that tells me that they are going to be a team that's going to be very competitive with the teams in there. The only signings they've really made is Tommins, and that is it. It's been a very quiet window. They've already lost João Pedro like right in the start of the window to Brighton. Got good money for it, but I'm really surprised that Watford have not really used that 34 million yet to potentially get some real major Championship quality players in. And right now, the whole thing with Watford about them chopping and changing managers, and Ishmael, I think, is interesting. Ultimately struggled a bit with his West Brom side. Could be the same scenario with his Watford side. And if there's disruption and the squad, you know, being relied upon to basically do the same thing as they did last year, and they really down tools with Wilder. They really did. And if they down tools again, I think it's going to be a bit of an ugly season. So 9th place doesn't sound terrible. It's a small improvement, but I'm definitely not backing them for top 6 as of yet. I'm nowhere near as confident, you know, with Watford as I have been in previous seasons. So 8th place is Millwall. I think Millwall will be around the same place as they were. And it feels strange with Millwall because Millwall have actually consistently been in that place, and they are definitely a team, I think, overachieving. And I think that's really good that they've done that. Joe Bryan from Fulham, I think, is a really good signing for them there. And this bit from Hibernian, I've heard good things about him getting on the score sheets some of the times I see Soccer Saturday, at least. So I know he's a alright striker. Whether he'll cut it in the Championship, we'll have to wait and find out there. But very quiet business for Millwall, which, you know, I do kind of expect. You know, their squad is already looking very strong. But I definitely would actually give Millwall a lot more faith if they actually did get more players in. I definitely think as of right now they've got the ability for it. And whether they'll get top 6, they have got the ability. But at the same time, I just think that top 6 this year, it's going to be very tough. So coming up next, just missing out of the top 6 in my opinion, is West Bromwich Albion. I think again, they will miss out, and this time, if I'm right in saying, this will be their 3rd year of parachute payments. So West Brom do not have a lot of years left regarding the advantage that they have over the parachute payments, and it's been a rather disappointing couple of seasons that they've had in the Championship since getting relegated since 2021. And I think again, they'll be closer. I think that we will see improvements with Corberán having a full season. And if he gets the form as Corberán did actually in his beginning part with West Brom, I think they will be able to really push. But I do have their issues with their current squad. I really do think a lot of these players should have been moved on like ages ago for some of them there. But in terms of I mean, they've not made any transfers. They've not made transfers. That is why I cannot put that West Brom team in the top 6. they've not made transfers yet. Until they show me that they're really being competitive this year, I cannot do that. And if anything, in hindsight, I might actually put West Brom to finish a little bit lower. But out of respect for how good I think Corberán is as a coach, I think as a full season, I think he will improve things with West Brom. I just think there's so much that can be squeezed out on this West Brom side. Likewise with Watford, definitely very underperforming. And I think, again, whilst I think there'll be improvements, I just don't think it will be enough personally. So now we made it to the top 6. 6th place for me is Leeds. They just snuck in there. I was very, very conflicted on my thoughts of Leeds at the moment. And their transfer business has been very quiet, but they did get their first major signing the other day by getting Ethan Ampadu. So a real experienced championship player, whether he's going to be the answer to make sure that Leeds will get promoted to the Premier League, I don't think that's the case. I think compared to the other recently relegated teams, they've definitely taken the slowest in terms of investing their squad and getting a manager in, and ultimately that's going to make things very difficult for Daniel Farke, who I think is a really good championship manager, don't get me wrong, but I think they would have really wanted to introduce him a lot earlier than what they did, and I think, in my opinion, had they done that, I think Leeds would be better equipped. But I think still with his experience and what Leeds still have as a squad in their disposal, I think they will be able to get into the top 6, but narrowly. 5th place for me is Norwich. So Norwich, I think, will improve a bit and they will get into the top 6, but I don't think anywhere near the level that we're used to with them winning the championship. In terms of their striker options, they've got Ashley Barnes coming in. Defensively, they got Shane Duffy and Jack Stacey coming in. So I do think they're decent players. I do think they are all right signings for Norwich, but I do think having no Kieran Dow and having no Timu Puki, I think is going to make things very, very interesting. They are definitely going to have to change the way that they play without those real integral players in that squad. So a lot of transition. I do back David Wagner to get more out of this Norwich squad. I think he was introduced in a little bit later in the season and didn't really have a big chance to put his stamp on things. Now with his first full season, I'd expect Norwich and Wagner to be in better terms and to be more on board in the way that they would like to play. So I'm going to say Norwich improve a little bit and finish around 5th. 4th place for me is Coventry. I actually think Coventry will have a 1 place improvement, and that is despite selling Victor Gyökeres to Sporting. I think their other transfers, though, have actually been really smart. They've not just prioritised getting strikers in, but they've tackled the whole area of that squad. De Silva and Latibodia come in as defensive options. You've got Sakamoto from Oostende in the Belgium League as a winger. And you've got Ellis Sims. Now, Ellis Sims is definitely no Victor Gyökeres in my opinion. I think it's going to be very hard on him to replicate that same pressures and successes. But he is someone who can put the ball in the back of the net. I have seen it in the Championship when he was with Blackpool and Sunderland for a little bit, and then obviously had a cameo in the Premier League with Everton. So he definitely can score goals, and I definitely think he's actually in the best part of his career at the moment. So I think this is a real big test for him. If he can have a really good season here, I think his value will shoot right up. And we saw that Gyökeres managed to rack up around 30 million, correct me if I'm wrong. So that coming out of Coventry, I think is really going to help Coventry going forward. And I think if they can keep producing those types of players to be sold for big amounts, it's going to do nothing but good for this Coventry team, in their next couple of years or so. Top 3 now. So 2 for newly relegated teams have still not predicted. And then there's Middlesbrough. And Middlesbrough is the team I've got in 3rd. So Middlesbrough is going to be an interesting wild card, as I said about many of these managers, because I think we almost had a record number of managers being sacked last season. This is now Michael Carrick's first full season with this club. And I think it's going to be an interesting one, because I think with Middlesbrough, they definitely played really well to the point where they almost had everything right. All they really needed was to keep going with their form within the playoffs, and they would have actually done enough. I think they're not as strong as they were, and I know I predicted them to finish a little bit higher, but let me explain. I think they are going to get some loan players in, which I think will improve their squad. And I think when those players come in, I think they will start to really show their same levels of success. But I think Middlesbrough, if they don't start investing those players in, they could be a team I could move down a bit. Despite the credentials that Michael Carrick deserves, I think a lot of that success last year was down not only to an incredible season by Chuba Akpom, but also due to the loan transfers that they managed to get from, Premier League clubs, Cameron Archer and Ramsey being two brilliant examples of those. So I think right now, Middlesbrough need a bit more. And if they had a bit more, I probably would have predicted them to finish in the top 2. But as of right now, I'm going to put them in 3rd. So that means for my top 2, I've gone for Leicester and Southampton in that order. I think Southampton will finish 2nd. The only thing that scares me a bit with Southampton is Russell Martin. I still am holding a little bit of doubt whether his style of football is suited for the Championship, because it's a very physical league. But I think with the way that he wants to play, it has got a lot of potential. And I think the players in that Southampton squad definitely can play that football, I think, more effectively. And the point is, they still got James Ward-Prowse. I think he will leave, but the fact they still got him, I'm really surprised. Shea Charles from Manchester City, I think is a big signing. To get him for over £10 million for a 19-year-old is quite a big transfer. A lot of pressure on his part there. But we have seen brilliant defenders from Manchester City do well. I look at Harwood Bellis as an example for how well he did with Burnley last year. So clearly Manchester City are producing a brilliant youth system, and I think Southampton are really looking into that and are really starting to try and build a very interesting and exciting squad. And I think it will be a breath of fresh air to see a brand new team in the Championship, and the first time Southampton have been in this league in over 10 years. But that means my winners are Leicester. So Leicester, I think, even with the manager, I think, being quite polarising, people are looking at stats thinking, oh, he didn't do a good job at Parma, he's not going to be good. Just think about who he has been working with. He has been working with Pep Guardiola. And when you think of a last assistant manager who's worked with Pep Guardiola, we think of Mikel Arteta and how well he's been able to do by himself as well. And I think the transfers that Leicester have made, definitely eye-opening. Callum Doyle, another Manchester City youth player I didn't even mention, he's joined Leicester. They've got a new goalkeeper here in Hermansson. They managed to get him from Burundi EF from the Danish league. Interesting transfer there, 23 years of age, so a young goalkeeper, could potentially be used for quite a lot in the future. Even if they kept Daniel Iverson, I actually could see him as being a decent backup keeper as well, because I tell you, when he was at Preston, he was absolutely brilliant in the Championship. And I think the two best transfers, by none, is Harry Winks. I think a Championship club is right for him at the moment. He's not been getting enough game time at Spurs. So I think a Championship season, I think, is what's needed for Harry Winks to see if he can put himself back onto the market. And Connor Cody, which I think surprised me more than any other transfer. I thought with Connor Cody doing so well to help keep Everton up, I thought he might want to stay there. But Leicester come knocking and he thought, all right, I'll join them then. And I'm really surprised that Connor Cody's stepped down back into the Championship, because I actually think he's a decent defender. But I really think those transfers for Leicester alone should put them at least top 3. Now with Maresca, if he does implement the way that Guardiola's been tending to, if he's learned some stuff from him, I'll be very intrigued if he has done that. But I just feel really excited about this Leicester team. I know they've lost Maddison. It looks like they're about to lose Harvey Barnes to Newcastle. So they are losing some big players, but these are all players we expected to lose, and they're generating a lot of money from those sales, and I think it will help Leicester in the future. So, very, very long video, over 40 minutes I took going through this entire table, but it's just me explaining my points of putting teams in each position. If you want these videos to be any shorter, please let me know in the comments down below, because I will keep that in mind for next time. So Right, what you see on the left hand side of the screen is my early championship predictions. As I said at the start, please, share your predictions as well, because I would really love to see them. And please share this video. I'll be really interested to see what sort of reaction I get when more and more people could potentially see my predictions. Some will probably be looking, thinking that I absolutely know nothing about football, and some may agree as well. So, as of right now, that is my current thoughts going into this current season. So this will wrap it up for today. If you guys enjoyed, please smash the like button. It really helps grow this channel. Please do hit the subscribe button as well. All these things really do help, and please share the channel too. All these things help as well. You can also see my Twitter is down there as well. You can drop a follow if you want to see occasional updates regarding the channel. If you want to join my Discord server as well, it is also the first link in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary. If you saw the end of this video, and as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.